The night shift has its own language. It speaks in the sterile hum of overworked servers and the distant echoes of forgotten coffee pots. For a year, I worked as a lone security guard in a 12-story corporate building downtown. The job was mind-numbingly simple. Patrol the floors, check the locks, and make sure no one was trying to steal expensive office chairs. Most nights, it was just me and the silence. The building was a ghost ship of cubicles and conference rooms, bathed in the sickly green glow of emergency lights. My routine was a ritual. Start on the 12th floor, work my way down, floor by floor, and finish with a check of the basement. The first few months were uneventful. I read novels, listened to podcasts, and drank an obscene amount of coffee. But then, the whispers started. It wasn't a sudden event, but a slow, insidious creeping in. The first time, I was on the 8th floor, doing my rounds. I heard a faint sound, like someone whispering a name, just at the edge of my hearing. I stopped, and the sound stopped. I told myself it was the ventilation system, or my imagination playing tricks on me in the dead of night. The next night, it was louder. I was on the 5th floor, and I distinctly heard a low, raspy voice say, "He's here." I froze, my hand on my taser, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I did a full sweep of the floor, checking every cubicle, every closet, every bathroom. Nothing. The building was empty. I began to tell myself that the silence was just getting to me, that it was the sound of my own paranoia. But the whispers became more frequent, more distinct. They weren't just random sounds anymore. They were directed at me. "Don't look," a voice would hiss, or "turn around." The building, which I had once found to be a boring and predictable space, began to feel like a living entity. Its metal and glass and concrete all just a shell for something I couldn't understand. The worst of it was on the 4th floor. It was the only floor that had never been fully leased out. The space was mostly empty, just a few scattered desks and chairs, and a small IT closet. The whispers were always loudest there. One night, as I was walking past the IT closet, the door, which was a heavy, steel-plated fire door, slowly creaked open. There was no wind, no draft. It just opened with a slow, deliberate groan. I looked inside. It was a small room, dark, with a single server rack buzzing with a low hum. Nothing seemed out of place. But as I turned to leave, I saw it. A dark, misshapen shadow, impossibly thin and tall, was standing in the corner behind the server rack. It didn't move. It didn't make a sound. It was just there, a void in the corner of my eye. I turned to look at it directly, and it was gone. The door, which I had left open, was now closed and locked. My hand was on the handle. I didn't remember touching it. The whispers now came from within the closet, a chorus of faint, chittering voices, all speaking at once, their words a jumble of static and dread. I began to avoid the 4th floor, making up an excuse to my boss that the elevator buttons were broken and I had to take the stairs. But the whispers followed me. They weren't just in the building now. They were in my head. They were in the quiet of my apartment, in the sterile silence of my car. I'd turn on the radio, but I'd hear them just beneath the music, a low buzzing static that was trying to form words. One night, I was on the 9th floor, looking out the large glass windows at the city lights. The building across the street was a mirror, and in the reflection, I saw a figure standing directly behind me. It was the same, impossibly thin, dark shape I had seen in the IT closet. It wasn't just a shadow anymore. It had a form, a vague outline of a head and torso, and long, spindly limbs. It raised a hand, and its whispers filled my mind, not my ears. They were a jumble of my name, the word "look," and a single, recurring phrase. "He's trapped." I spun around, my taser in my hand, but there was nothing there, just the empty hallway and the flickering of the fluorescent lights. I quit the next day. I told my boss I was moving out of state. I packed my things and left, leaving behind the locked doors and the whispering hallways. But I didn't leave it behind. The whispers are still with me. I hear them when I'm alone, just at the edge of my hearing, a low, constant murmur that never goes away. I'll wake up in the middle of the night, convinced I've heard my name whispered from the closet. The dark spot in the corner of my eye is always there now, just a tiny bit larger every time I look away. I didn't escape the building, I just brought it with me. And I know, with a chilling certainty, that the whispers were right about one thing. He wasn't trapped in the building, he was trapped in me. My name is Marc, and for the past 3 years, I've worked the graveyard shift as a hospital janitor. Most people think of hospitals as places of healing, but on the night shift, they become mausoleums. The halls are quiet, the lights are dimmed, and the air is thick with the lingering scent of disinfectant and something else. Something metallic and sterile that never quite goes away. My job was simple: clean the operating rooms, mop the hallways, and empty the biohazard bins. It was a thankless job, but it was a job. I kept to myself, and the quiet hours allowed me to drift into my own thoughts. The hospital was a labyrinth of identical hallways and patient rooms, each one holding its own untold story. The night shift staff was a small, quiet family of nurses, orderlies, and myself. We all had our own routines, our own ways of dealing with the dead quiet. The whispers began in the ICU. It was a closed unit on the 3rd floor. For the most critical patients, I was mopping the main hallway, the squeak of my mop a lone sound in the emptiness, when I heard a woman's voice. It was faint, almost a sigh, but it was there. "Help me." I stopped, my heart rate picking up. I checked the patient directory. All the rooms were occupied, but all the patients were either sedated or in a coma. I went on, telling myself it was a TV from a room I had missed, or a nurse talking to a patient. But the whispers continued. "Please, help me." They were always the same words, the same voice, a woman's plea. I never saw anyone, never saw a patient out of their room, but the whispers would follow me from room to room. I began to feel a sense of unease, a sense that I wasn't alone, that I was being watched. The whispers became more frequent and more specific. "He's watching you," a raspy voice would hiss from a corner. "They're still here," another would whisper from a closed-off room. One night, I was cleaning the surgery rooms on the 5th floor. They were always unsettling, with their sterile smell and the cold, metallic gleam of the surgical tools. As I mopped the floor of operating room 4, I heard a new sound. It wasn't a whisper. It was a low, mournful sigh that seemed to come from the surgical table itself. My blood ran cold. I stood there, frozen, and the sigh turned into a long, drawn-out groan, as if someone were in great pain. I ran out of the room, my heart pounding in my ears. I never told anyone about the sounds. They would have thought I was crazy. The worst of it came on a particularly cold night. A new patient had been admitted to the ICU, a young man who had been in a terrible car accident. He was in a coma, his body a map of broken bones and internal injuries. As I was mopping the floor outside his room, the whispers began again, only this time they were different. They weren't the usual pleas and warnings. They were his voice, the young man's voice, clear as a bell. "Help me," he whispered, his voice full of a chilling dread. "They're in my room. They're standing over me." I looked through the glass window of his room. The heart monitor beeped slowly. The young man lay still in the bed, but I saw something else. A faint, shimmering heat haze, a distortion in the air, seemed to be standing over his bed, and in the corner of my eye, I could see 2 more distortions. They were there, just on the edge of visibility, like heat rising from pavement, but in the shape of humanoids. They were reaching for him. I stood there, rooted to the spot, a primal fear seizing me. The whispers became a chorus, a frantic cacophony of pleas and wails, and I could hear the young man's voice, a single, terrified shriek in the mix. I ran. I didn't stop until I was in the employee break room, gasping for breath, the hospital's silence seeming to mock me. I told myself it was my imagination, that the lack of sleep and the morbid nature of my job were getting to me. I went back to the ICU, an hour later, my body trembling. The young man's room was closed off. A nurse was standing outside the door, her face grim. I asked her what happened. She said he had flatlined. They couldn't get a pulse back. He was gone. I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that it wasn't a heart attack that killed him. It was what was in the room with him. The hospital wasn't just a place where people died. It was a place where they lingered. I quit my job that week, telling them it was too much for me. But I didn't leave it behind. The whispers are with me. I hear them when I'm alone, a low, faint sound on the edge of my hearing. And sometimes, when I hear a siren in the distance, I feel a cold dread. And I know that somewhere, in the sterile silence of a hospital, a new story is beginning. The third shift at the laundrette, as the sign called it, was a special kind of lonely. I took the job a few months after my old security gig went belly up. It was a 24-hour laundromat, and my job from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. was to make sure no one broke in. The machines were running, and the customers were, well, they weren't. It was always empty, just me, the sterile scent of laundry detergent, and the constant, hypnotic thump of the dryers. Most of the time, I'd just read on my phone, the glow of the screen, a tiny island in the fluorescent sea. It was simple, quiet, and exactly what I needed. But there was one machine, Dryer 7, the one no one ever used. It was a standard industrial dryer, identical to the other 20 in the row, but it had a reputation. The regulars, the few who came in during the day, would always avoid it. Some would even walk out if it was the only one available. They'd say it had an off feeling, a kind of wrongness that made their skin crawl. I just thought it was an old machine with a rusty drum. The thumping from Dryer 7 was different. It wasn't the rhythmic tumble of clothes, but a slow, heavy thud. It sounded like something solid, something dense, hitting against the metal door. I'd check it every night. The drum would be empty, the door locked, the machine off. But the thudding would start up again after I turned my back. The first time I saw something was a week into the job. It was 3 a.m., and the laundromat was dead quiet, save for the thumping. I was a few rows away, and I glanced up at Dryer 7. The light inside the drum was on, a sickly yellow glow. And for a second, I saw it. A shape, a fleeting shadow that moved too quickly to be anything. But it was there, a dark smear against the glass door. I walked over, my heart in my throat. The light was off. The door was locked. Nothing. The air around the machine was colder than the rest of the room, and I could feel a strange pressure, like the air itself was getting denser. I pressed my hand against the glass door. It was icy cold. The thudding stopped. The next night, I was determined to get a better look. The thudding started up again, that slow, deliberate beat. I walked over and peered through the glass, and this time, I saw it clearly. It wasn't a shadow. It was a face. Pale, gaunt, with wide, dark eyes that stared back at me, its mouth a gaping, silent scream. It was a man, his features distorted, as if he was pressed against the glass from the inside, his face a mask of silent terror. I jumped back, a scream caught in my throat. I fumbled with my keys, trying to unlock the machine, to open the door, to do something. The thudding grew frantic, faster and faster, a desperate, rapid-fire beat. The face was gone, replaced by a single, dark, swirling shape that seemed to be trying to force its way out. I couldn't get the key in the lock. My hands were shaking too much. The climax of it all came on my last night. I was a week overdue on my pay, and I was going to quit. But I had one last shift to get through. The thudding from dryer 7 was relentless, a non-stop pounding noise that had become the soundtrack to my shift. I had decided to ignore it. I sat at the front desk, staring at my phone, trying to block out the sound. But then, it stopped. The silence was more terrifying than the noise. I looked up. All the dryers in the row were now thumping, a synchronized, rhythmic beat. And they all had faces pressed against the glass. Pale, gaunt faces, all with the same dark, wide eyes and silent screams. They were all there, one in each dryer, all staring at me. I backed away from the desk, my skin crawling. I saw the first dryer 1, start to turn, its thudding sound coming back, but faster, more frantic. The face inside was a blur of motion. I looked at the next one, and the next. They were all turning on, their doors locked, their drums empty, but their lights on, revealing the silent, screaming faces trapped inside. I didn't quit. I ran. I burst out of the laundromat, leaving the door unlocked, the lights on, the thumping dryers behind me. I didn't stop until I was a mile down the road. I never went back for my last paycheck, never told anyone what I saw. But sometimes, late at night, I hear it. The thudding, a faint, low, persistent beat, like a single, distant dryer. I've even tried to do my own laundry at a new laundromat. I walk in, and I see them all. The machines, the doors, and in the corner, I see the light flicker on a single, isolated dryer, and I know it's there. They're all there, waiting.